The boardroom was cold. Derek Crane sat at the head of the table and slid a contract toward me. My eyes found my name. It should have been there, at the top beside the project title. But it wasn't. Instead, Account Manager, Christopher Vale. Christopher. Someone Mitchell had hired 6 months ago. Someone I'd trained on this entire deal. Someone who had barely said 2 words during our entire 3-week project. Someone who sat in the corner taking notes while I did the actual thinking. My jaw tightened. I said nothing. But inside something broke. Something that had been holding me together for 5 years just shattered into pieces. I'd stayed late nights. I'd worked weekends. I turned down dates because I wanted to be the person who delivered. I'd read every email from James 3 times to make sure I understood exactly what he needed. I'd built the entire solution from the ground up. And now my name was erased. The conference room door opened. James Whitmore, the client, walked straight to my side of the table and extended his hand. "Lauren, good to see you again." He didn't even glance at Christopher. His eyes were locked on mine. Mitchell's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Caught it. I always caught these things." "Of course," Derek said smoothly. His voice taking on that practice tone he always used when things weren't going according to plan. "Christopher and I wanted to walk you through our strategy." "Actually," Andrew said, pulling out his phone. His expression completely calm but with something steel underneath it. "I received this confirmation about an hour ago. A $10 million deposit has been wired to Isabella Consulting LLC. That was the account I specifically set up with Isabella's information." Mitchell's face went white. He actually gripped the edge of the table like he needed something to hold on to. "What?" he said. "You can't do that. The contract specifies." "That contract is void," Andrew interrupted flatly. "The money's already transferred to Isabella. I don't care about your specifications. I'm leaving. Isabella, when you're ready to discuss the next phase, call me." He walked out. He didn't hesitate. He didn't negotiate. He just left. For a moment, Derek just stared at the empty chair where Andrew had been sitting. The silence was deafening. Then his eyes moved to me, filled with pure rage. The kind of rage that comes from losing everything you thought you had in 30 seconds. "My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 32, and I've spent 7 years in corporate account management because I'm good at reading people and delivering what they need. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood where my parents worked steady jobs and told me the secret to success was simple. Work hard, be honest, and good things will come to you. I believed them. I still mostly do, even after everything that's happened. But I'm also learning that the world doesn't always reward good things. I started at this firm 5 years ago, eager to prove myself. Derek was considered a rising star. I felt lucky to work under him. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks before the boardroom, Derek called me in. "I want you to take point on Andrew Whitmore," he said. "Build the relationship. Close it." I should have asked why he wasn't handling it himself. A senior account manager should have taken a $10 million deal. But I was hungry. I was eager. I wanted to prove that the little girl whose parents told her hard work pays off was right. So I said yes. For 3 weeks, I practically lived Whitmore dynamics. I studied their financials. I mapped their operations. I created a restructuring plan that was honest about their problems but showed a clear path forward. I didn't oversell. I didn't overpromise. I just showed them exactly what they needed and how we could deliver it. Andrew started trusting me. And I trusted the system to reward that work. 2 days later, Andrew called me back. "Just the 2 of us. No Derek." "I need to be honest," he said. "I've worked with your company before. Years ago. The person managing my account took credit for work that wasn't theirs. Made promises that didn't get kept. Blamed their team when things went wrong." My stomach tightened. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. "That experience taught me something important," Andrew continued. "It taught me to pay close attention to who's actually doing the work and who's just taking the credit. And in your case, Isabella, I've been watching closely for 3 weeks. I know that you're doing the actual work. I know that you're the one who understands my company. I know that you're the one who's going to deliver. He leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. So here's what I want to know. If I were to hire your consulting firm directly, not the corporation but your personal LLC, would you be interested? Pay the same amount. All the terms would be the same. The only difference is that the payment goes to you. I felt something shift in my chest. This was a test. A test to see if I actually believed in my own work. A test to see if I was willing to step out of the shadow of the company that had hired me. I'd have to think about that, I said carefully. Andrew nodded. He didn't push. Instead, he pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Take this, he said. It has all the legal documentation ready to go. Count numbers, payment terms, everything. You don't have to decide right now. But when you're ready, let me know. Back in the present moment, sitting in that boardroom with Derek and Andrew, I suddenly understood what had just happened. Andrew had already made his decision. He'd already tested me. He'd already decided that he wanted to work with me, not with my company. And now he was calling me out in front of everyone who mattered. Derek's smile disappeared the moment Andrew pointed to the contract. This says I'm working with Christopher Vale, Andrew said flatly. But I've been working with Isabella. Every strategy came from Isabella. Every solution came from Isabella. Every single thing that led to this deal being worth $10 million came from Isabella. Derek shifted in his seat. His confidence was cracking. Christopher was brought in to take credit. Andrew interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Because that's what this looks like. And I've seen this playbook before. I've been burned by it before. Temperature dropped. Andrew, Derek said, his voice becoming smooth and oily, the kind of voice he used when he was trying to manipulate someone into believing his version of reality. Christopher is part of the extended team. Isabella brought him in to help with the technical aspects. It's standard protocol to have the senior account manager on the contract. It's not personal. It's just how the company is structured. Stop, Andrew said, his tone ice cold. I've been in business for 23 years. I know exactly what this is. I know what this feels like because I've experienced it. And I'm not doing it anymore. He pulled out his phone, showing an email to the room. I received this confirmation an hour ago, Andrew said, looking directly at me. His expression was calm, resolved. $10 million wired to Isabella Consulting LLC. The account number I specifically requested from Isabella. The money's already gone. The transfer is complete. There's no reversing it. Derek's face went absolutely white. I could see him doing the calculation in his head. The deal was gone. The commission was gone. Everything he'd planned was gone. You can't do that, he said. His voice cracking slightly, desperation creeping in. The contract specifies that payment goes through our firm. We have legal agreements about this. There are protocols. The contract that doesn't have Isabella's name on it, Andrew asked, raising an eyebrow. His calm was more devastating than any anger could have been. That contract. He stood up. He gathered his folder. He looked at Derek with something between pity and contempt. That contract is void. I don't care who drew it up. I don't care what your protocols are. I'm not paying it. The money's been transferred to Isabella. And now I'm going to leave. When you're ready to discuss the next phase of our partnership, Isabella, call me. He walked toward the door, then paused. And Derek, he said, turning back slightly, if this is how you treat the people who actually do the work, I can't imagine working with you again. Then he was gone. For a moment, Derek just stared at the empty chair. Then his eyes moved to me, filled with an intensity I'd never seen before. Not just rage, but the kind of fury that comes from realizing you've lost everything in a single moment. What the hell did you do? Derek said, his voice dangerously quiet. We were alone now. Christopher had already slipped out, smart enough to know he didn't want to be anywhere near this. I didn't do anything, I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. Andrew decided how he wanted to structure the payment. You told him to wire it to your personal account, Derek said, standing up. His hands were shaking. You sabotaged this deal. You stole from this company. The deal was never the company's, I said quietly. Andrew wanted to work with me. Not with Christopher. Not with you. With me. He offered to pay my LLC because he wanted to work directly with the person who actually did the work. Derek slammed the table so hard that everyone in the surrounding cubicles flinched. You have no authority to accept payments on behalf of a personal business while employed here, he said, his voice rising. Do you understand what you've just done? I'm going to have to report this to HR. I'm going to have to report this to legal. And then I'm going to terminate your employment for breach of contract and misappropriation of company assets. My heart was pounding, but I didn't let it show on my face. I'm documenting this conversation, I said quietly, pulling my phone from my pocket. The recording app was already running. I turned it on before entering the boardroom. And I'm copying HR on a formal notification that I've been threatened with termination in retaliation for a client's independent decision about payment structure. Derek's eyes narrowed as he realized what I'd just done. The color drained from his face. You're recording me, he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. I'm protecting myself, I said. Something I should have done a long time ago. That's illegal, he said. Not in this state, I replied. And everything you've just said is now documented. Your threats, your accusations, your retaliation. I stood up and looked at him directly. I'm done, I said. I'm done working for someone who doesn't recognize the difference between a scapegoat and a leader. I'm done pretending that the system will eventually reward honesty. And I'm done waiting for people like you to validate my worth. I turned and walked out. Isabella, stop. I was halfway down the hallway when Derek caught up with me. His hand grabbed my arm, spinning me around. We were in the middle of the floor now, visible to everyone. Visible to the people in the open concept office who were all pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. This was the moment that would be talked about for months. Let go, I said, pulling my arm away sharply. My voice was steady, even though my entire body was shaking from adrenaline. What the hell were you thinking? He hissed, keeping his voice low even though we had an audience. But low didn't mean quiet. Everyone could hear. That was $10 million. That was the biggest deal this company has landed in years. And you just handed it to yourself like some kind of... I didn't hand anything to myself, I said, my voice rising just enough so that people could hear every word clearly. I did the work. Closed the deal. I spent 3 weeks building that relationship. I created the entire solution. Andrew decided he wanted to pay me directly instead of paying the company. That's his choice. He's the client. He makes the decision about who gets paid. Not you. Not anyone else. Him. You manipulated him, Derek said, desperation mixing with rage. His face getting redder by the second. You told him not to pay through normal channels. You convinced him that working with you independently was the right thing to do. You sabotaged this intentionally. I did no such thing, I said, my voice ice cold. I told him I'd think about his offer. He made his own decision. He wired the money because he wanted to protect me from someone exactly like you. Someone who erases people's names from contracts. Someone who takes credit for other people's work. And frankly, after the way you just treated me in that boardroom, I can't imagine why he'd trust anything that goes through you. Derek's face was absolutely crimson now. His jaw was clenching. His hands were forming fists. People were definitely watching. People were definitely recording this on their phones. This moment would be screenshotted and sent around the office before he even made it back to his office. You're fired, he said, his voice low and deadly. Pack your things and be out of this building in 2 hours, or I'll have security remove you personally. Something inside me wanted to beg, wanted to apologize, wanted to explain that I hadn't meant for this to happen, that I'd just been trying to do my job well, that I'd trusted the system to reward hard work and it had betrayed me instead. But I didn't say any of that. "Okay," I said instead, my voice completely calm. "I'll be gone within the hour." I turned and walked back toward my desk, leaving him standing there in the middle of the hallway, shaking with fury and impotence. His breathing was heavy. His face was purple. He looked like a man watching everything he'd built crumble. Because for the first time in my career, I realized something fundamental. Derek had all the institutional power. He had the title. He had the authority. He had the corner office and the influence and the relationships with executives. But he didn't have control anymore. That had just shifted in a single boardroom meeting, and we both knew it. The question was what I was going to do with that shift. My hands were shaking as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. 12 years of work. 12 years of client relationships, successful projects, personal growth, relationships with colleagues I cared about. All of it was being condensed into the kind of box you'd use to move a small apartment. It was surreal and devastating and somehow also liberating. What was more surreal was the phone in my hand. Still recording. I'd sent a message to HR saying I needed to discuss my employment status immediately. And 5 minutes later, Derek had come storming back to my desk, unable to help himself, unable to let it go. "You think you're smart," he'd hissed, leaning over the divider of my cubicle so that only I could hear but everyone around could see the intensity of his anger. "But you're going to regret this. Do you know how many people I know? Do you know how many firms I have relationships with? I'm going to make sure you never work in finance again." The phone was in my pocket, tilted just right, capturing everything. "I'm going to tell every single person I know what you did. I'm going to tell them you're unstable, that you're manipulative, that you tried to steal company money, that you made inappropriate advances toward a client." That last one was new. That was a straight-up lie, and it was being recorded. "You're going to be so toxic in this industry that you'll have to move to another state to find work. Nobody's going to touch you." I let him go on. Let him rant about how he'd discovered me as a nobody, how he'd trained me, how he'd given me opportunities, how ungrateful I was, how he'd never take credit for my work, even though he obviously had, right there in the boardroom just minutes earlier. Every word was being captured, every threat, every false accusation, every moment of his loss of control. Finally, he realized he'd said too much. He straightened up, smoothed down his tie, and said in a lower voice, "I'm going to destroy you." Then he walked away. I was sitting there, staring at my box of belongings, when someone appeared at the edge of my desk. It was Jessica from HR. And from the expression on her face, I knew immediately that she'd heard at least part of Derek's rant. She'd heard enough to understand that something serious had just happened. Andrew called me that evening. I was sitting in my apartment staring at $10 million in my bank account. The number on the screen was surreal. I'd never seen that many zeros before. For a moment I just stared at it, trying to process what it meant. This was money I'd earned. Money that was credited to me because of work I'd done. It wasn't a salary. It wasn't a bonus that could be taken away. It was mine. "I assume Derek is furious," Andrew said when I answered. "Furious doesn't begin to cover it. He fired me this afternoon." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," Andrew said. "I didn't expect that he would go that far." "It's okay," I said, and I was surprised to realize I actually meant it. I think I needed this. I think I needed to know what I'm capable of when I'm not waiting for someone else to validate me. "That's the spirit," Andrew said. "Now let's talk about what comes next. I have a 12-month contract ready for you. This would be your company, your terms, your equity. I've learned what happens when you work with mediocre people just because they have the right title. I'm not doing that anymore." We talked for an hour about the terms. Salary that was nearly double what I made before. Scope of work that actually matched my expertise. Deliverables that were realistic. Timeline that was generous. Everything was fair, generous, and intentional. When we hung up, I called my best friend Thomas. "I just got fired," I said when he answered. "Are you okay?" he asked immediately. His voice filled with genuine concern. Actually, I said, I think I might be better than okay. I think I might just be free. I spent the next week crafting a formal complaint letter to HR. It was professional, unemotional, devastatingly detailed. I laid out the timeline with precision. 3 weeks of work on the Whitmore Dynamics account. My emails to Mitchell confirming my lead role. My communications with the client. The presentation I made. The terms I negotiated. The relationship I built. Then I showed the contract with my name erased. Then I documented the retaliation. The firing threat. The public humiliation in the hallway. The false accusations sent to the executive team. The threats about destroying my career. And then I attached every piece of evidence. Every email. Every file. Every communication that proved what I was saying was true. I was building a case that was airtight. At the bottom I wrote, I am not requesting employment with the firm. I am requesting that the company acknowledge the misrepresentation in this case and take appropriate action to prevent similar situations in the future. I was not begging for mercy. I was not asking for my job back. I was simply presenting facts and asking for accountability. I sent it on a Friday afternoon, copying James on the message. Then I turned off my work email and didn't check it for 48 hours. I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give people time to sit with their own actions. The executive team called an emergency board meeting. Mitchell didn't know it was about him. Not until he walked into the room and saw James sitting there, across from 3 senior executives. His face went pale immediately. Patricia called me the next day. They want you there tomorrow at 10 a.m., she said. They want to hear directly from you what happened. I arrived at 9:55 a.m. wearing a blazer and slacks. I looked professional. I looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom. The office felt different. People who'd been avoiding me suddenly made eye contact. People who'd been on Mitchell's side suddenly looked uncertain. Word travels fast in a corporate environment. I walked into that conference room and James was already there. He gave me a subtle nod. A gesture of solidarity. A reminder that I wasn't doing this alone. Then Mitchell walked in. His face was pale. He was already sensing that something had gone very wrong. Lauren, the CEO said, surprise evident in his voice. Thank you for coming. Of course, I said, taking a seat across from Mitchell. We've been reviewing the Whitmore Dynamics account, the CEO continued, opening a folder filled with documents and emails. And we've discovered some significant issues with how the account was managed. Mitchell's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Specifically, we've discovered that Lauren was the primary account manager, and her name was removed from the contract without her knowledge or consent. We've also discovered that she was terminated in retaliation for client preferences. I can explain, Mitchell said, his voice tight and desperate. Lauren overstepped her authority. We have 43 pieces of correspondence that show Lauren's leadership on this account, the CEO interrupted, sliding documents across the table. We have client testimony stating that James Whitmore specifically requested to work with Lauren and not with anyone else from the firm. Mitchell looked at me like I'd betrayed him, which I had, but not in the way he meant. I'm going to be direct with you, the CEO said, looking at Mitchell with an expression of cold professionalism. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation into your management practices. You're to turn in your access credentials and leave the building. Mitchell stood up. His entire body was shaking with rage. You're believing her, he said, pointing at me. Over me. I built this division. I brought in millions of dollars. With the help of people you've systematically taken credit for, the CEO said coldly. And we're going to be examining that. James leaned forward slightly. I've also decided, James said, his voice steady and clear, that I will not be continuing business with your firm. Not under these circumstances. Not with a management structure that enables this kind of behavior. The color drained from Mitchell's face. The $10 million deal. Mitchell was fired 2 weeks later. Security walked him out of the building. He was escorted past rows of desks where people he'd managed were watching. He was stripped of his access credentials. He was no longer a rising star or someone of importance. He was just gone. The investigation didn't stop with him. The company hired an external firm to audit every account managed by the division. They found 17 instances of misrepresentation. 17 instances where people's work had been stolen or minimized or misattributed. Some of those people were brought back. Some had already moved on and found better opportunities. But all of them received official documentation that what had happened to them was not their fault, that it was systemic, that it was a failure of leadership. The company was learning what accountability looked like. And I was watching from the outside, as the founder of Hayes Consulting LLC, the firm that had been chosen over them. Patricia asked to meet with me one last time. We met at a coffee shop away from the office. She looked different. Older maybe. Tired. Like the weight of having stayed silent had finally caught up with her. I owe you an apology, she said. When you came to me after Mitchell fired you, I should have protected you. Instead, I was afraid. I was afraid of what he could do to me. I didn't say anything. I let her continue. I want you to know that he had been reported before. Not by name but through anonymous complaints. Performance issues. Personality conflicts. We always assumed it was just interpersonal drama. We never dug deep enough. And that was our failure. You're apologizing now, I said. What changed? You, Patricia said simply. You documented everything. You refused to disappear. You forced us to look at what was happening. And now we can't ignore it anymore. She slid an envelope across the table. The company is offering a settlement, she said. As recognition of the injustice you experienced. As a gesture of goodwill. There's no requirement that you accept it. But they wanted the offer to be on the table. Opened it. The number was substantial. 6 figures. What if I don't want their money? Yes. Then we'll understand, Patricia said. But we wanted you to know that we recognize what was taken from you. I didn't take the money. Instead, I asked the company to donate it to an educational program for women entering the finance industry. I asked them to fund a mentorship program pairing junior employees with senior ones to prevent power imbalances. I asked them to make a public statement about what had happened and what they were doing to prevent it from happening again. The company agreed to all of it, because they realized that if they didn't, I had enough documentation and credibility to go public. I had Andrew backing me up. I had 7 other employees backing me up. I had an airtight case. They were better off with me inside the solution than outside pursuing the problem. 2 years after being fired, I was featured in Business Weekly magazine. The article was called From Erased to Essential. How Isabella Hayes Built an Empire. It told the story of what happened. It told the story of how I stood up for myself. It told the story of how integrity can be a more powerful tool than manipulation. The article went viral. Suddenly I was getting calls from other companies. From employees who'd experienced similar situations. From people who wanted to learn how to document their work and protect their contributions. I started a podcast. I started a consulting service specifically designed to help companies identify and fix toxic management practices. And I did it all from my consulting firm, with the freedom to choose my clients and shape my work. Andrew was right. I should have always been working for myself. 6 months ago I got an email from Derek. He wanted to meet. He wanted to clear the air. He wanted to move forward. I read it once and then deleted it. Then he tried LinkedIn. Then he tried Facebook. Then he tried to call through a mutual contact. Every attempt I closed the door. Because I'd learned something important through all of this. You don't owe forgiveness to people who hurt you just because they're finally facing consequences. You don't have to absolve someone of guilt just because their life became difficult. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's not public humiliation or financial ruin. Sometimes the best revenge is simply this. Building a life so full, so real, so authentically yours that the person who tried to erase you becomes completely irrelevant to your story. My name is Isabella Hayes. I own a consulting firm. I mentor people who've been overlooked. I speak at conferences about integrity in business. I wake up every morning knowing that everything I have, I actually earned. Derek tried to delete me from a contract, but he couldn't delete me from reality. The lesson isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that no one has the right to erase you. If they try, don't fight them in the ways they expect. Don't match their manipulation with anger. Don't answer their lies with accusations. Instead, document the truth. Protect yourself. Build something better. And then let your success speak louder than their failures. Because in the end, the best response to being underestimated is proving yourself undeniable.